we're going to be starting our landscape project, and I'm going to just show you how to do the first steps. So here's a final, or almost final. I started painting it, but it has its color in, but you can kind of see how it's broken down into basic, simple line designs of a landscape. So there's not a lot of details with like grass or shading with your pencil. It's just really shown the landscape in a very simple form. So today I want you to come up with either your own, or if you're having a hard time kind of knowing where to start from, you can, sorry, the focus is on this. There we go. Nope. All right. So you can find a landscape idea from the pink table. There's a bunch of different calendar pictures and photos. If you find one that you kind of like to start from, you do not have to do it exactly as you see it. In fact, I would rather you create it in your own way. So this is one that I looked at, and just to have a starting point, I looked at, okay, if I'm going to simplify this down into basic shapes then and lines, what kind of areas have these lines kind of breaking them up? So I can see there's like a line here, and then there's another line coming up over here. And even if I don't really look at the trees to let it kind of confuse me, there's another line kind of going up here, and it kind of keeps going all the way up until we get into this mountain area. And then we kind of have it juts up here. So if you can follow along with your finger, you can kind of see what the basic line design and line shape of this photo is. So that's kind of the top edge. There might be another line here. And then we have all of this stuff going on, but I don't want to focus on that too much. I want to look at the basic shape. Now when I took this and looked at it, I broke it down and made it my own. So instead of the two buildings, I decided just to do one. I didn't do any of the shading or filling it in. I just looked and I saw diagonal lines and horizontal lines. And I even threw in, there's not any water over here, but I decided to throw in some water with rocks and kind of a sandy bank with the grass coming down and another row of kind of a field or a hillside. I really wanted to focus on foreground, middle ground, and background and what that would look like. So here I have this house and a tree. Now if I measure this tree, it is actually just as tall as the mountain, which obviously a tree is not as big as a mountain, but visually I know that things in the foreground should be the largest because they're closer to us. And as we get back, they get smaller. So these trees are obviously smaller than that tree. And then our mountain is just the same size as this tree up here. So things get smaller as they go to the background. If you want to do your own, so we need to make sure we have our name and our class code on the back. But then I need to just kind of think, okay, how am I going to make a landscape that's showing foreground, middle ground, and background, and using basic lines. So to start, I might want to look at my sheet here that you can find at Pink Table that has a bunch of different line ideas. I might want to start with some wavy lines. So I'm going to start in the foreground, the front of my picture, and I'm just going to add some wavy lines. I think of this as the water. So I have some water, and maybe that line changes a little bit. It's getting more rounded. And it might gradually get to be a different type of line. I know that now that I have some water, maybe I want to possibly have some kind of boat. So I'm going to draw a simple boat right here. And I might go and kind of make this line a little curvier. And up here, this might be my last water line as it's almost getting straight. Now this, I feel like, could be my middle ground. Make sure you guys can see this. So I know a basic shape or a basic line would be a straight line. So this is kind of going to be my horizon line right in the middle of my paper. Kind of where, here's my foreground, this is my middle ground, everything back there is going to be my background. So this is going to be kind of like a beach, we'll say. So I could even later go and add just a couple different. You might think of them as, if I'm going straight across, a dotted line, since we're sticking to our lines for designing our landscape. And I'm going to add these dotted lines going all the way across. Now I might decide to have kind of a bumpy line as kind of the bank to my beach here. Like the grass is coming down. And then on top, if I want to show some grass, I might add some kind of spiky, curvy lines for my grass. Now I still have my whole background to come up with something. So I know I need maybe some land or hills, so I'm gonna make some kind of hill maybe here, some kind of rolling hills up here. I'm getting close to my background, so I might decide back here I'm gonna add maybe like a forest. So I have some trees. They're fairly simple trees because the whole design of this is just to focus on the types of lines we're using and the foreground, middle ground, and background. So my trees should not be very large because they're in the background. So I'm going to go ahead and make some trees here. Now my trees are the same height as the side of my boat. And obviously if they were next to each other, if this tree was in the foreground, it would be very large and tall. But because of where it is on my paper, I have to keep in mind the size to make these objects. So I have my cluster of trees, my forest back here. And when I get done with this, I need to look at my picture. Did I fill it up? Do I feel like it has a good balance? I might want to put something over here. Maybe I just have a sun, a simple sun, or maybe I have some clouds. Now when I look at my shapes, I keep saying shapes, my lines, I kind of like this spiral idea, so maybe those are in the sky. Maybe it's kind of like if there was wind, there might be these curlicue lines or spirals. Kind of like last year we studied Van Gogh and his Starry Night has these swirl lines. So I can fill this up. It's a windy day. Some could be large, some could be small. Okay. So there I have my windy day. Now, if I look at this and I wanted to maybe add a little detail, maybe my boat, I'm like, yeah, it just kind of looks like a rectangle. Is that really a boat? So maybe I want to add a little bit more detail. But again, I don't want to do any shading. And shading would be if I did kind of a scribble, kind of color it in. I'm going to stick with just lines. So I'm going to look at my boat and how could I add detail with just adding lines? Maybe there's like a side to my boat. And maybe my boat, you can see into it. And there are some seats on my boat. The front, the back, and the middle. And maybe if I want that kind of shaded look, but I want to do it with lines, I'm going to add just some lines on the sides of my boat. Okay. So there I have my boat. I want it to look a little 3D. You might add more to it there. All right. Now I could decide maybe even I want some lines going on into my ground here because I have this big area. So maybe I want to make some diagonal lines to really emphasize this hillside going up. So they're kind of curvy diagonal lines. And the same thing with this one over here. Maybe I want them going the other direction to show these different hills. All right. Now I came up with my very own landscape. You guys see that there? I have my foreground, my middle ground, and my background.